I'm going to have you, first off, I want you to tell us about yourself, how long you've been in real estate, first off, and then also how you met Ben and how that partnership started.
Okay, so I've been in real estate 22 years, and I was started in 2002. So I'm in my 23rd year now, and I was in real estate for about 8.5 years, and I was just, doing well on my own. I closed 24 that year that I met Ben. I had closed 36 transactions. But I had 3 small kids and I was doing it all by myself. So I was looking for somebody to partner with and leverage with. And someone introduced me just by chance to Ben, and fell in love with him, fell in love with his model, and decided to partner with him. So that's what I did. And that was 14 years ago.
Now,
And yep.
you were Ben's first expansion partner too.
Yeah, actually, I saw that you put that in that post, and at the time, the expansion partner wasn't even a thing. Like, I think that Ben started that because I wanted to join him, but he was 40 minutes north of where I lived, and I didn't want to drive that every day to his team. And there was an office that he owned that was 15 minutes from my house. So I just said to him, "How do I be part of your team and not have to drive to Bellingham?" And because it wasn't a 40-minute drive, it was where I was from, my area. That was where my farm, my sphere, everything was for years. So he just said, go to my office and sit in a cubicle, and I'll give you leads. You sell some real estate, we'll both make money, and high five. And that was pretty much it. So I started that in that cubicle. But then naturally, people would come up to me and say, "Hey, I see that you're having some success. Who's this Ben Kinney kid? And can I join the team?" And so it naturally started to grow. And that's when Ben was like, "Wait a second, this expanding out of my location is actually working." And him and Gary talked, and then now we know it as expansion. So yes, I was the very first expansion.
You were the very first, not only for Ben, but for everybody.
I don't know. I feel that. I don't know if I can claim that. Maybe there was somebody out there somewhere else, but I believe I was the first to kind of get that going. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Well, one other thing I want to touch on too is you manage so many things so well. And some of those are like when you were actually running your team, you also served as team leader for 6 months for Ben.
Yeah, I saw that you put that, and that is accurate. I don't know if it was by choice, but that was accurate. I was just in a situation at the office where the team leader had an emergency. Their child had cancer, and their father had cancer. So it was one of those things where it was overnight. He was just like, "Hey, I can't come back tomorrow." And Ben was actually flying to Austin, and he messaged me and said, "Hey, there's a big meeting tomorrow and he's not coming in. Can you handle that meeting?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm on it." And I just took care of it. I've been at that office for a long time, so I know the way it works. I was always at the meetings. I was always in the agent leadership, the ALC, the agent leadership committee. So I just kind of jumped in, and I held down the fort, I guess you could say. So I didn't apply for it. He didn't hire me for it. I was just holding down the ship until they found somebody right for that position. And it happened to take 6 months. But I did that while running my team, while running my business. And I was grateful for when he did find someone, but I was able to just fit that into my schedule and make it work.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to kind of share with everyone as far as where you're coming back from your credentials and stuff. And then
Yeah, you bet.
Tell us about the disc now. What is the disc and why is it important for us to use?
So this actually probably goes back to when I first started with Ben. And then I'll share some slides with you if that's okay. When I first started with, and actually even before Ben, before I started with Ben, I came to my office, and I don't know if everybody on your team has already taken their DISC profile assessment. They have. Wonderful. I would say that's the first place to start. I took my DISC profile assessment, and I didn't know anything about it. And I had somebody, the team leader, team manager at the office, assess my DISC for me. And I believe they did it incorrectly. And what I mean by that is they took the DISC assessment and they said, you're this, that's why you're not going to be good at this. You're this, that's why you're going to thrive at this. And they kind of put me emotionally feeling in a box like, uh-oh, am I not going to be good at this career? And that's not what the DISC profile and the DISC assessment is about. The DISC assessment is, I truly believe, understanding your strongest traits and the traits that you're not strong in, and how that affects your real estate career. So I have a large real estate team. I've got 26 agents on my team, and I have 4 different locations now. I have every single DISC profile on my team. And we have high Ds that are successful, high Is that are successful, high S's, high C's. I think every profile can be successful. And so I think sometimes people just jump into, here's the label of what a D is, here's the label of what an I is, and it's just concrete and that's what it is. I don't feel that way. So I kind of had a negative thought about the DISC assessment for a long time. And then when I truly learned it and truly understood the value of it, which is hopefully what I'm going to give you a little snapshot of today, I not only understood myself better, but then when I was sitting across from buyers and sellers, my conversion dramatically increased solely by using the DISC and applying the DISC to my clients. So let me share my screen, and I will share my slide deck with you guys. So let me just get this situated here. Okay, can you see my deck?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if I know there was at least one person driving, if you are driving and watching this, there's nothing that you need to look off eyes off the road. This is really just to guide us through the conversation. I can provide these slide decks to you if anybody wants to go back and look at them. But again, safety first. If you're driving, I will walk us through it. So I truly believe that this is one of the tools that we went over that. This is one of the tools that I have used to communicate better with sellers. So if everybody on the call has done their DISC assessment, great. If you haven't, go and do the DISC assessment. If you're somebody watching this later or watching the recording, and get an understanding of what your natural traits are, and then the pros and cons of your natural traits. So just a quick overview. And this is where I think sometimes people go wrong or take this DISC to heart, is you see charts like this, and like the D, it says dominant, right? Then the people that might not be a high D, or they might be dominant in some areas of their life, but they're not described as, oof, that person's dominant, that person is a driver, right? They might not be described that way. You automatically have this feeling, and I'll just speak for myself. You know, I've always been a salesperson. I've always been an entrepreneur. You know, I'm having this large business. I walk into this company with my brokerage, not the team, with closing, you know, that year, 36 transactions. I've never closed, even my first year, I closed 24 transactions. And then having somebody say to me, oh, you're not a high D, you're not a driver. And I'm doing this all with 3 kids in tow, right? And I'm like, so it gets that automatic defense built up. And so when you see this, I would say just use some of these words as a guide and a flow of understanding people's personalities. And I'll dig into this a little bit more as we go on. So the D typically is driver, competitive, a doer, influencer for the eye, somebody inspiring, enthusiastic. If you use your hand gestures, and we'll be getting into that a little bit about signs to look for with buyers and sellers. And then an S, steady, stable, things like that. A C for compliance, cautious. And the reason I just wanted to briefly go over this is because when I first went into my listing appointments, when I first went into my buyer consultations, I would go in with my DISC assessment profile because that's who I am. So my DISC profile is I would say high I and medium D. So both of those above the medium line, in the top quartile of the assessment. My S and my C, I put no S, no C. I have a little bit, but it is literally just peeking over the chart. And so that's what my assessment was. Now here's a way in the beginning. One of the assessments for S and C is compliant, organized, systematic. And I was like, I'm an S and C. What are you talking about? Because I actually taught classes on how to organize your contracts, my contracts were so detailed that everybody asked me about them. The office manager asked me about them. So when I first got this, I kicked back on it. As I realized what my natural tendencies were, the reason why my contracts were always in compliant, why I always checked them, I was never missing initials, I had everything turned in time, and they were so organized, was actually because of my fear of getting sued, right? It was my fear of making a mistake and looking bad, which is probably more my I personality coming out than my S and my C. The organizational for me is very painful. The digging in and knowing the numbers and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, I have to work for that and be purposeful for that. That's not my natural tendency. So what was happening was once I figured that out, then I could focus on what do I need to focus on to perfect the weaknesses that I had in this career. And so looking at this, I was going into the listing appointments with my personality. And some of my listing appointments, some of my buyer consult appointments, I was nailing it. I was getting it, high five, I'd get that and I'd walk out, and I was doing quote unquote well. But there was a lot that I was losing because I was going in with, if we look at the DISC, I was going in enthusiastic. With the I was going in telling them about this great marketing plan that we had. I was going for the close and saying, great, let's work together. Quicker in the conversation. I was keeping it short and sweet, right? And just getting to the point. And so when I had D or I sellers or buyers, they were saying, yeah, let's do it. But when I was sitting in front of clients that were a higher C or a higher S, I was moving too fast. I wasn't providing enough information, and I was losing those appointments. And when I sat down with Ben and we went over the DISC assessment, and he was saying, like, how are you showing up? Because I didn't understand why I would get some and lose some, and I'd be doing the same presentation. What am I doing wrong? So he was saying, how are you showing up? And what I realized is I'm showing up with my personality and not showing up prepared for every personality. And so the one thing that I would say when I flipped over to converting a higher conversion on my listing appointments and getting my buyer agencies signed is I really sat down and I discovered the DISC, and I looked for different things in the profiles that I could detect from buyers and sellers, so then I could talk and use the language of the people in front of me versus me. My personality is really irrelevant at a listing or a buyer consultation. If I can pick up cues on how the people that are sitting in front of me hear information, you're going to win that listing and that buyer appointment quicker. So I just quickly looked at all the material I was bringing to a listing appointment or a buyer appointment and made sure that I had something for every personality. We're going to be
Hmm.
going through that, and the buyer consultation and the listing consultation. I'll even bring up some of our place pages, and then we can look at it, and you'll see now that we've talked about this today, you'll go back to the buyer presentation and the listing presentation, and you'll see pieces of those presentation that speak to the different personalities of the profile. It's of the disc. It's really cool. Any questions so far? Okay, so I do see there's one. Somebody said yes, please, and I wasn't 100% sure what that was for. Will you watch chat for me if there's anything in there, Wes? And okay,
I'll do it.
awesome. So, and if anybody wants to come on and ask questions, it's just an open forum, but we'll have questions as well. So, walking into an appointment with a high D profile, a high D profile client is going to want the direct approach. They don't want the fluff. They don't want the, talk about all the marketing. They want to know, what are the numbers? What are we going to net? How are we going to get there? If it's a seller, they're going to want to know, what are the numbers as a homeowner? Tell me how this makes sense for me. And so, for example, in our buyer consultation book, the Dream of Homeownership page, I think, is one of the most critical pages for a high D. Is you
Mhm.
can say, here's the facts, here's the numbers, this is what you're going to save in taxes, this is what your overall savings is going to be, and here's how it's going to appreciate. This one, this page is really good for a high D. This page is also really good for an S, understanding the process, getting the numbers. Somebody who's analytical, a C, this would be really good for. So this is a really good page for high Ds. And we'll talk about some others as well. There we go. This is a great page. Now, with our books, our buyer and this one's the buyer, so I'll focus on that. I have seller ones coming. In the buyer guide, the buyer experience, I don't talk about every single page in the buyer experience. I've mastered, as I'm sure all of you guys have, I've mastered the whole presentation. And when I get into that appointment, I don't go page by page by page, because you are going to lose some personalities. The high D personality, almost all the personalities, you will lose them if you go page by page. If you understand your clients, you can then go and select specific pages to satisfy what they're looking for, and you'll get to the close quicker. So this is one for a high D that I love using, because it's an overview page. And here's what's going to happen when working with me, and you go over the page about, what does the market look like right now? What is the list to cost ratio? What is the month of inventory? Talk about days on market, negotiating. Here's what I do. And every time we look at a house, I am going to do the 555, and we explain that. This is a great one that I love to use with people that need the answer, want the answer, and want it quickly. The high I personalities, the inspiring, enthusiastic, persuasive, they're the ones, when you walk into that buyer appointment, if they are saying things like, this is seller, if they are saying things like, what's really important to me is the flow of the house. What's really important to me is how I feel when I want to be able to see my kids from the kitchen. I want a nice spot for my dog out back. You're going to get those feelings as you walk through with a buyer. One of the telltale signs of a high I buyer when you're out looking is when they walk in and they're commenting on the furniture. When they walk in and they're talking about, I don't know if I like this red wall, the paint, right? And they're not focusing on the structure of the house. You can tell that, and there's certain ways to kind of combat that as you go through and you're walking through with the client. When you're talking about selling a listing with your sellers, they're going to be really interested in do you do open houses? What does the marketing look like? Sometimes, like, for example, I'll walk into a listing and they'll say, let's sit at the kitchen table and talk about what this looks like. What personality do you think that trait would be just out of the gate? Do you have an
S.
idea? An S, maybe, right? Absolutely, that's an S personality. It could be a D personality as well. It could be a D personality going, hey, I'm going to give this girl 10 minutes. She needs to tell me how I'm going to sell my house and get the most amount of money, right? It could be an S personality. I need to know every single thing before I decide what we're going to do and move forward. So the reason why I asked that question is because as we go through this, if you're thinking of yourself, well, wait a second, an S would be like, this is a high C wants to know, or a high I wants to know marketing. And a C would also really be interested in this because they need to know that you've got their back. They need to understand every single component of where you're going to target their marketing. So a lot of these things could be dual profiles. And so that this is just a guide, something to look for when you're in the appointment, when you want to elevate one page and lower another page. And even to add some more complication to that, Wes, I'm sure you've done this. I'm sure everybody has felt this, is you've walked into an appointment and the wife is a D and the husband's a C, right? Or one is a D and an I and a C. So you'll get different things, but as you start looking at this, I encourage you to, when you're talking to your spouses, when you're talking to your kids, when you're talking to your clients, think to yourself how they're responding, where could that fit in? And like we just did, Wes, this could fit in with a high C or a high I. And you can almost use every page in here for each personality. I would just use it a little different. So we're on this page, for example, finding the right house. This page talks about looking at the homes that are listed, looking at open houses, for sale by owners, foreclosures, off-market properties, new construction. If I'm talking to a high I might say something along the lines of focusing on, I'm going to make sure that I turn over every stone and I'm looking at every property, Wes, and I've already talked to them, right? Because at the top of this presentation, we already know a little bit about what they're looking for. So I might use this page and say, if I know they're a high I personality, I might use this page and virtually say the same script, but I might add in, because I know how important it is to you, Wes, to bring your kids into this home. And we have an open floor plan that you can watch your kids, from the kitchen making dinner, right? Whatever they said, I'm going to wrap back around in here. For a high D personality, I might just say, there's multiple ways that we look at homes, and I might list one or two, right? And I might just say, I want you to know that you don't need to worry about that. Every day I'm going to be searching that and only sending you the properties that make the most sense for you. Then what I'm saying to them when I'm saying that is they don't have to weed through a whole bunch of other junk. I'm going to make it simple, direct, and send you the properties that I think you're going to like the best, right? It's quick response to that. So each slide you could use for something else or for each personality. The high S is steady, stable personality. They tend to want to understand the process more. They're the ones that you might say, and these are the ones that I lose the most, because I tend not to slow down and go over every step of the process. But here's the kicker with high S personalities. When they say they want to know the process, and this I would say is SC, this slide, they want to know the process, they want to know the details, they want to understand what's next. They ask a lot of questions, more so than the high I, more so than the high D. They ask a lot of questions, S's and C's. And so then I tend to want to give them all that information, but then we are overloading them. And then they would say, man, thank you for all the information today. I'm going to go home and process. I'm going to go home and sleep on this. I'm going to go home and think about every wonderful thing you said, and I'll get back to you. You've given them almost too much information. So as you're going through the process, make sure you are watching their body language. If they start to have eyes glassed over, if they start to stop asking you questions, you know you've almost gone too far. You need to pull back a little bit. So with the high, and that's for me, because I'm not high S, I need to make sure I regulate that in my conversation of giving them enough information that satisfies them, but not too much information where they feel overwhelmed. So for example, I brought up this page. So and an S wants to feel stable. An S wants to feel they're being heard. And so when I go through this process, I don't go through every single step of this. I don't go through, okay, Wes, so first we're going to make an offer, then we're going to negotiate, then we're going to get the offer accepted. And after we get the offer accepted, then we're going to go through the loan process. And here's how the loan process works. It's almost too much information, but they want to know that their captain of their ship knows what they're doing and has their hands on the wheel, and they can feel that the process is going to be smooth. So I tend to touch on a few of these of Wes, you know, and this is through the book. So from making an offer to negotiating to going through the inspection process, all the way to closing, I want you to know that I know every step. And as we are moving through the process, I'm going to walk you through step by step. Right? They need to understand that you have control, and then I also say, and I'm going to give you this, whether it's over Zoom, digitally, or in person, that you can go home and read this later. But I want you to know that when we're walking through the process, I like to make sure that everyone knows where we are and what the next few steps are going to be. So you'll always feel in control and what you know what is coming up, right? If I know that I can feel that I have a high S, high C, a high C, and Wes, is this call over at 7 or in 2 minutes or 32 minutes? How much longer?
Keep going. No, keep going. You're giving great information right now. Okay.
Okay. I just didn't know how long we had. So high C personality, they're going to want to know the details as well. They're going to want to know the numbers, the net proceeds for the seller. The high D also wants to know the numbers. They're going to want to understand, explain this to me, what's behind this. They're going to want you to justify, and the D and the C probably more so want you to justify your commission for what you're providing. You're going to get that from that personality more than the others. The high C's is going to want to know the what ifs. So what if this happens? What if that happens? What if the interest rates go up? What if we don't find a house? What if we find a house and we haven't found a house for our list or a buyer for our listing yet? They're going to want to understand and know that as well. So this page I think is really great for that. So just really quick, I wanted to go through some of the listings, and then we'll open it up, and if anybody has questions, and I'll talk about some of the signs that I see for all of these profiles if you want, or if you guys had specific questions. The power of a team. This page here in the listing presentation is really great for Ds if you use it quickly. Wes, I'll pretend you're my seller. There's 180 different tasks that every agent needs to work on for a listing. I want you to know you don't need to worry about any of those. I am your number one point of contact. I have a great team behind me that helps leverage all of those activities. that I can focus on what's most important to you, right? Like just straight to the point. If I know that I had a high I in my mix, I might say that same thing. If one of the spouses was a D and the other one I felt was an I, then I might also add in there and our marketing manager is amazing. She's going to make these great marketing pieces and we're going to have your listing really shine, right? I'm going to use the things that help benefit the client. This page also, I love this page. You could use this page for a high S. You could use this page for a high C. High S, they're going to want to know, is there's everything is looking taken care of. The process is in order. All of those things are going to help you win listings. See everything. So what do you think, either Wes or somebody else, what do you think this page on a listing would attract or be important to somebody with what personality or profile, I should say? A D, an I, an S, or a C, or all of them?
I'd say C,
Why would you say C?
because they want to know what the details are, and that way they can actually get in and look at them to see what's being done.
Yeah, this is huge for a C. Absolutely. It could also be good for an S because they could go and they could click on the links of where we're marketing it, things like that. Could probably spin it. Those would be my top two. When you're dealing with sellers with multiple personalities, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they might have two highs on the disc, or one spouse might be one personality, one might be the other. I love our overview pages in our listing presentation and our buyer experience presentation, because this page in itself, what makes your home sell, our pricing strategy. That would be what?
A C.
A C, absolutely. I'd say a D, a C for both of those. How it shows.
Would be an I and probably an S.
Yep. How it's marketed.
I'd go back to the I again, and also I'd say a D on that one too.
Okay. And then international marketing.
That one's, it goes back to I, and also on that one is a C, because that's a detail of them picking up another 5% of the buyers out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree on on everything that you said there. And the one caveat, you guys, is depending on who the sellers are or what their experience is. So sometimes they could latch onto something. So for example, what makes your home sell? Our pricing strategy. The D and the C, like you said, are very interested in that. Sometimes it might get confusing because you might see somebody and I might peg someone as a high I personality, IS personality based on what they're saying. And they might be fixated on the pricing. So sometimes I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking about that. Sometimes how they respond is signs of their other of what's important to them. So for example, if you're talking to somebody who's a high I, and I really can, if I'm talking to somebody, very quickly determine at this point what their tendency traits are and what I need to say to fulfill that tendency trait. But if I've pegged somebody as a high I personality, I've walked into the listing appointment, and I'll give you a real life example. I took one of our new agents. They had set a listing appointment. I walked into a listing appointment. The seller, the husband that was greeted me, the wife was in another room. The husband greeted, and he said, "Oh, just throw your stuff down on the coffee table. Let me show you the house." So immediately I'm thinking he's a high I personality. High D personalities will not show you the house first. In my belief. And so he showed me the house. As we were walking through the house with my agent, he would say things like, "Isn't this purple wall beautiful?" It was like a lilac purple. "Isn't this bookshelf amazing? My wife created this." We walked through the whole house. He was high eye all the way, nothing else. Then we sat down, and he said, "What do you think my house is worth?" And at first I thought, when he went straight to that question, have I misunderstood what I thought his personality was? And I simply said to him, we were talking about his price, and I said to him, I talked about the 555 method. And I said, I threw in there about, when we're finished, you and I are going to walk through the house, and I'm going to write down some notes of things that I think that you can add or take away or do in the home to help elevate your price. And he said to me, "Oh, good. That's why I was asking. Do you think the purple walls are too much? Do you think that's going to affect my," and he went right back to what the house looked like, right? So I said, "Yep, I'm going to take care of that with you. We're going to walk through, and I'll give you some a honey-do list and a suggestion of what you can do to bring that value of the house up." And he said, "Oh, you're amazing. I can't wait for you to list my house." And I said, "Awesome. Here's the paperwork." I didn't even open the presentation, right? I think sometimes we can talk our way out of listings, and we can talk our way out of buyer agency agreements because we feel that every personality needs to know every single thing that we do. And that is not the case. So just a couple more, and then let's open it up with questions. So communication, active buyer database, all of these things, I think you could go for each personality. Communication, if it's somebody who's short, sweet, tell me the details, they will start out the conversation with, how much am I going to get for my house? What do you think my house is going to sell for? How much is your commission? That's how they're going to start the conversation. Somebody might, with a high D, somebody for communication with a high C might say, "How do I get a hold of you if I need to?" What if that doesn't happen? "Thank you for coming today. We're looking forward to talking with you. We're not going to sure what's going to happen if our house doesn't sell," right? Like, before you talk about anything, they're throwing those what ifs in the place. Communication might be, like this here, the script says, "In this market, constant communication with potential buyers and agents who even express a little interest will help speed up the sale and maximize the price to receive your property." A high D doesn't want to know all that communication. I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they said in order for us to get your home sold faster, right? You may want to use that same communication with a high I of, "I'm going to make sure that you know all the feedback. So if there's anything in the house that is preventing buyers to put an offer on the house, you and I can sit down and we can rectify that together." Communication on a high C might be, "I'm going to make sure that through our 24/7 website that we're fully transparent, you can go on anytime, that and you can call me anytime with questions that you have. I'm going to walk through all the process with you." That is high C. You might want to go into that more. If you tell a high D, "I'm going to walk through every step of the process," you will probably lose that listing, right? So that's how each piece you can use for each assessment. I'm not going to go through these because I know we are running out of time, but we could go through each one of these and find, I'm going to stop sharing, and find how they relate to your real estate business, and the pros, and how you're going to win a listing with each slide, and how you could lose a listing or a buyer with each slide if you overdo either one of them. So does anybody have any questions or on any of this? Or Wes, do you have any questions?
I'm going to open it
Or
up to the group
Jana?
first.
Okay.
Uh, before you assess me, I'll just volunteer. You know, I'm very high I and D. Okay, so still, I mean, still pretty fascinating that you are using the listing and the buyer to that precision. So I guess this is observation a little bit that you know, you're really, from the very moment, you're reading all the cues, and people are giving you cues constantly. I guess that's in all of life. You can really be using those cues.
Yeah.
So so it does seem like studying the disc very well, and then taking that tool and sitting down with the listing brochure and the buyers and making that the most powerful way to go in. It seems also like you have to make sure you get yourself out of the way, because I'm always naturally going to operate under my own whatever skill set, or, you know, my own materials, I guess.
Yeah.
So am I
and
reading
showing
that
up
right?
as, yeah, absolutely. And showing up as your authentic self is important. I think that, you know, you are going to win a lot of clients, whichever personality you said your ID, whichever personality you are, you're going to build your base, and you're going to, I'm not saying in any way show up and be fake. You're going to win because of your personality. And we're salespeople. So if some of your personality is, and I'm talking in general, not you, but if some of your personality is overboard, right? Like I'm a high I tend to talk a lot. I need to know that when I'm in that situation, Tamara, control your talking, because not everybody's going to be receptive to that. But your core person of who you are, that's, you show up authentic. When you show up to those appointments, what I used to do is I used to show up in my personality. Now I show up, and it's a personality trait versus personality, right? Like I am who I am, but I show up fully prepared to meet whoever is across from me. So I always have all the tools, from the net proceeds to the trends graphics. I don't know if you guys use trends graphics, market report of what's going on in the general market, to the listing guide, to the 555, the active pending sold. I have everything for every personality in my toolkit, in my bag, in my purse. I don't always use it, because if I get there and I see that some of the tools that I brought aren't going to be receptive to the people across, I'll leave them in my purse. And I don't bring them out. I went on another example. I went on a listing appointment with my operations leader, Tiffany, and she wanted to come watch me in action and present a listing presentation. So she came to the listing with me, and I had sent the listing presentation to these sellers prior to coming. And the reason why I don't always do that, the reason why I did, based on my conversation, I could tell he was a very high C personality, asking a bunch of questions. So I emailed them, said, I'm really looking forward to meeting you. Here's a copy of our presentation. Because I knew if he had time to absorb that before I got there, that would save time at the presentation. And hopefully, my goal is always to sign on the first appointment. So we showed up for the presentation. I had all my packet, everything piled in my purse. Sure. Took it out, as I always do. I have my, you know, the net proceeds, everything in a stack. The other thing I always do when I'm running comparables is, on my notebook, I always write in the top right hand corner my bracket of where I think the house is gonna be priced. And I do that. So I sit down with these guys and I said, did you guys have, you know, thank you for inviting us, that kind of stuff. He first said, sit down at the kitchen table before we saw anything, right? So I knew, again, that's validating. I've got a high C, high D sitting in front of me. Sit down at the kitchen table. And I said to them, I said, did you have an opportunity to look through the listing guide? That's also a telltale sign what their profile is. If they say, nope, we didn't have time to look at it, most likely it's a D personality or an I personality. Not always, but most likely. But they said, yes, we looked at it. In fact, they started quoting different pages from the book. We were really impressed with this on this page. We were impressed with this on this page. And so that was a telltale sign what their personality was as well. They said things like, we're impressed with this, we're impressed with that. We were agent number 5 that they interviewed. So then my very next question is the last script in the listing presentation. And we were there for about 60 seconds at this point. I said, was there anything in our book, that in our presentation, that was missing that the other agents had that we didn't have? And they said, no, you've had way more than what the agents had. So my very next question was, so before we get started, what do you guys think the price of the house should be? And they looked at each other and they laughed and they said, well, that's why we brought you here. And I said, I know, I often get asked, I often get that answer. And then I covered the corner of my page and I said, I actually have been examining the market, and I talked about the 555, how we look at the active pending and sold. And I have an idea of where I think your house should be marketed. Now, that's a caveat because we haven't looked through the house yet. But I've got a general idea. And then when we look through the house, we can sit down and look at the comparables together. Their response was, yeah, we've seen a lot of comparables. Remember, I was number 5. So I said, okay. And I said, so where do you guys think? He said, I think it's 1.7. She said, I think it's 2 million. So I opened up my piece of paper and it literally said 1.7 to 2 million. Well, I think it was like 1.75 to 1.95 is where I had it in that bracket. And so we all kind of chuckled. We were in the same page. So then I literally just said, you guys seem like you're up on what the market is showing. Now we just have to figure out who's going to win the battle of what we're going to list the price at, right? And in this point, they were getting multiple offers, and we're back to that now. So I just simply said, what if we did this? What if we listed at 1.75? My expectation is that if it is supposed to be at 2 million, it will escalate to that. And they looked at each other and they said, we think that's fair. I said, all right, you want to show me your house? And they showed me their house. We went back to the table, signed the listing paperwork, and then we left. And so Tiffany was really upset because she didn't see me do the presentation at all. But the point is, they didn't care. They didn't want that. They wanted to feel trusted. They wanted to feel like they were with somebody who got them and understood what they were looking for. And long story, we ended up at $2 million because it escalated. So she won. So yes, I would say, Jana, show up as your authentic self, but know when your authentic self is too much for the personality in front of you, and when you need to dial that back or dial that up, and then be prepared for every disc profile. And then we're salespeople. So the disc profiles should lead your sales. If that makes sense. I know if I'm if I'm sitting in front of a high C personality, that's going to be a little painful for me, but I'm going to sit there and I'm going to go through every single number. I'm going to bring out the stats. We're going to look at what the market's doing. We're going to do all of that. I have to be purposeful about that when I go in listing appointments. But now I'm winning listing appointments with high C personalities where I wasn't before.
Tamara,
Great.
what approach
Thank
do you take when you have a high I, and you know when you do a call, it's going to be 20 to 45 minutes? Because Aleem has had a couple of high I's, and so has Annalise.
Yep.
When you do a phone call, are you talking about a client? Are you talking about getting secure, like a lead, or?
Aleem, I'll let you chime in here.
Yeah, I mean, it could be both. It could be, a lead generation call, or it could even be a listing appointment. I've had a lot of listing appointments with very high eyes that last anywhere from 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's being a high I myself, that's not one of my strengths, because like I am fine if somebody wants to spend 2 hours with me, I will sit and spend 2 hours with them. However, what I will say is I try not to leave the signing. So if you say a listing appointment, I try to I have been known to get the listing signed and then still stay another hour afterwards, just because I like people and I like to talk. And if they want to talk to me, I will. However, some of the tips on it shouldn't take 2 to 3 hours. So some of the tips on that is I will say things like, Aleem, that's a great question. Let me write that down and we'll go over that later. Right. So they hear that you're hearing them, or like, for example, if they are talking about their house and they're talking about, well, what if I do this? And should I paint this wall? And should I do this? And tell me about what you've seen about houses that shine or something like that. I will say, Aleem, that's a great question. And let's talk about this, and this. And then when we're finished with going over the 555, the pricing strategy, when we've signed our agreement to move forward, the very next thing I'm going to do is I always bring an extra notepad, a yellow notepad. I'm going to give you a yellow notepad. We're going to walk through the house and I'll give you all my suggestions on that. Fair? So I try to redirect them back to where I want them to be. If honestly, if I'm in their house and I'm doing a listing presentation, I'm actually using the listing presentation, and every page they want to, ask a million questions just to talk, I probably will not do the whole presentation. I probably will stop and say, if they talk and ask a million questions on a page that didn't really warrant that, and I know at this point that this is going to be a long presentation, I might say, Aleem, gracefully somewhere in there, right? It's not rude at all. I might say, tell me what are three most important things out of that you're looking for out of our relationship. 3 most important things you're looking that's important to you for your listing. And see what they say. If they say it's really important that you do open houses, it's really important, I want to understand about the marketing. I want to understand about, what else would a high I say? Marketing, information about open houses, and what you think my house is worth, whatever, say those 3 things. Then I might simply just go to the 3 pages in the presentation that talk about those 3 things. Anything else that's important to you? Well, whatever, I might answer one question. Okay, great, awesome. And then I might just go right for the close. So Aleem, going back to you for a second, when you say 2 to 3, also the other thing I will say is, and I don't know if this is your situation, Aleem, but I used to do this a lot. When you're going to win every appointment and it's going to be shorter when you ask more questions versus talking. So somebody would say to me something along the lines, anything, and I would chime in with a story. Oh yeah, this has happened before, and da 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 da. So how much of that conversation, Aleem, are you having? Because there's a delicate balance between having them feel like you hear them, but adding to the conversation that now it's like a back and forth. You guys are buddies. I used to have the back and forth buddy conversation a lot. But now I do better at stopping and asking questions of, so can you give me an example, and I'll answer to you how I would answer.
Let's see here. I get people that just like to I guess not necessarily talk, but kind of explain things into detail that's unnecessary. I'm a high C, so
Okay.
I think when I
So what things specifically are they explaining to you in high detail?
it's usually like 85% things that are completely unrelated.
Unrelated to real estate at all?
Just real estate or things that are not beneficial to the conversation that we're having, or I mean, I get some people are high S where I have to kind of flex and reach out to them on a social standpoint and on
Yeah.
a sincere standpoint. Obviously, you know, talk about family and talk about these things, but a lot of the time it's just I'm not sure if they're very serious about what they want or they're just looking to talk.
Okay. So not knowing the exact conversation, some of the strategies that I use when I go to appointments, and I'll be totally honest, this strategy is more for me because I do talk a lot. So the strategy is more for me versus the seller. I will show up, I bring my folder with all my information in it. Inside my folder is the listing guide, the what we talked about, the net proceeds, the everything inside the folder for the DISC, the contracts. One of the things that I used to have a hard time with is transitioning from tell me about what you guys want, here's what we do, and now sign the contract. So one of the things that I do when I first get to a listing appointment is before I open it, like I shared with you that other listing, I will get a feel for who they are. Tell me a little bit about, have you been watching the market? Do you have a feeling for what your house is worth in the market? You know, where are you going? Those kind of things, that initial conversation I will start, and that will indicate what the direction and where I'm going. I will open up my book, if I'm doing the normal listing presentation, I'll open up my folder and I will talk out loud. Aleem, here's my goal for today. I want to make sure that I understand everything that's important to you to sell your home. I've brought some things with me that are going to help guide us through this process. And I take out our listing presentation, or I'll take out our listing experience guide. This guide will talk about every step of the process and answer most of your questions, and I'll lay it down on the table. I'll take out the listing paperwork and I'll say, this is our marketing agreement. As we're moving forward and you and I decide to work together, I'll go through this and make sure that you're clear on our relationship, and I'll put it here. I'll talk about that after we go over the market analysis. I'll pull out all the comparables. These are the comparables. I pull them out for a couple reasons. One, because I'm saying, here's the listing presentation, here's when we're going to talk about it. So then for me, it just helped it not be that awkward transition, and it's on the table, like literally on the table. And if you know you talk a lot, or you're walking into an appointment where you know the client talks a lot, I will usually say, you know, well, we're different time zones right now. It's 7:30 in the morning for me, almost 7:30. Say we're at a listing presentation, I will say, you know, Aleem, I have quite a bit of time for us today. I don't need to leave here, probably the latest at 8:30 or at 8:15 or whatever the time slot that you have, 45 minutes, an hour. So if you set an hour, I just have to leave here at 8:30 in order to be at my next appointment on time. So you're already kind of laying down, this is an hour appointment. Do you potentially have an hour? I don't think it should take an hour, but I want to make sure that we have enough time. Do you have an hour that we can spend together, Aleem? And if they say yes, awesome. But now you've already laid that down. So come, let's say 7:30 to 8:30, as you're kind of going through the process and they're asking a million questions, I might at 8 o'clock say, okay, great. So let's review some of these steps, Aleem. Next, I do want to go to the agreement because we've got 30 more minutes, and what I'll do is this, right? So you're all kind of teeing up the time frame of recentering them and pulling them back into what you want to talk about. Does that help?
Yep, that does. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay.
You bet. And I think when you start the conversation with, here are the 4 or 5 things we're going to talk about today, I think that if you're spending too much time on one thing, of course, you don't want to say, hey, we're talking too much about this one thing. But you can, in the presentation, for example, you can, I would make sure also you're not going over every page of the presentation. You got to know it all, but you pick the pages that is going to get you to the close that you want. But if all of a sudden they're just dragging through that presentation and asking you a million questions, in the beginning, when we talk about their goals and we talk about what are the 3 most important things that you want to get out of today, or what are the 3 most important things when you list your house, I would make sure you cover those 3 things. And if they keep talking, I would say, oh, this is great. I love sitting here talking with you, Aleem. I'm getting to know you so well and what's important to you. Here's what I think we should do next. Let's put this aside because I'm going to leave this with you, so you'll have plenty of time to go through it. But there's a couple other things that are really, you need to be in control of that conversation and be able to pull them back in. So I have some like taglines, right? Like, before we leave today, this is really important for me, that I want to make sure you have this information. So I'll just close the book, put it aside, and bring out the comparables, right? Let's go through some of these comparables together. If I bring 15 comparables and before I do the comparables with them, I'm already understanding if they have a general idea of where the house would be, right? As I'm going through the comparables, if they're agreeing with me and they're like, you know, if I think their house is worth 500,000 and they're like, yeah, this one's exactly like mine. Yeah, I was thinking about 500,000. I'm like, awesome. Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And I just wrap those all up. I don't show them the rest. And I just put them over to the side. Now let's make sure we get to this, right? You're the leader of that. The last thing I want to say on that popped into my head that's really important, I think, is you are the controller and the leader. No matter the personality, if you walk into that house and they say, oh, sit down on the couch, you know you're in for a long haul for that appointment. I always say, oh, absolutely, that sounds good. But you know, there's a couple things I want to spread out that might be easier on a table. Do you have a kitchen table we can sit at? And I like to sit at a kitchen table. It's more professional. You're less likely to relax on the couch and sit in for a 2 or 3 hour appointment at a kitchen table. So those are some of the things that might help with that.
Tamara, you've been awesome today. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I hope it added value. I hope you guys look at the disc in a different way. And just know that every personality is a great, strong personality. And when you guys, the last thing I will say is do this with your family. I did it with my kids and I did it with my husband. I had them all take the disc assessment, and I will tell you, it improved my relationship with my husband and improved my relationship with my kids, because I know better how they receive what I am giving. And I love this. So I'll happily talk with anybody about this. So if you want to talk more anytime, let me know. Thank you for the invite, Wes.
All right. Well, thank you again.
All right.
Great.
Bye, guys.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
guys.
much.
You're
Mhm.
welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.